See, a happy new year and everything is so good. It's been far too long and everything. And in the audience, it's a pleasure to welcome to the program a stalwart member of the New York City intellectual leadership element, if I may say, if not the planet. And that's none other than Judith Malina, her own self. And she is, of course, the co-founder of the Living Theater, which lives and prospers and it advances the causes of human liberation down now on Clinton Street in the Lower East Side after having been all over the world and so forth. And she's a dear friend of the world and myself. And Judith, thank you very much for coming to the studio, and so good to see you.
Thank you for having me here to be able to talk about our plays and our hopes and our vision.
That's what it was. Now we got a whole 58 minutes, right? And I do want to say I'm really sorry. I'm going to say it. I'm sorry. I'm really because we've done many a program with you and
Hannon.
Well, with you and Hannon, and you also, you know, with Julian. We did one with Julian. We're going to try and get up and so forth. And Hannon passed. I was shocked out of my wits.
Yes.
I was so sorry.
Yes.
I think the whole poetic community of New York was shocked. I'm terribly sorry for your loss.
Well, he was a very strong voice.
Yes.
And his voice reverberates in our work.
Yeah.
And it isn't lost.
No.
It's lost to me, and I suffer for it.
Yeah.
But the work of the Living Theater goes on.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
After he died, I finished a play that he was working on.
Yeah,
it was called Eureka.
Right, I remember, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we had a very successful run with that. It's a remarkable play in which the entire audience participates through the entire play.
Didn't you do that sometimes down on 27th Street somewhere or something over in the West Side? Or you did a play where everybody participated over near 2nd Avenue and 22nd Street or something?
All of our plays have had audience participation.
Yeah.
But this is the first play I know of where the audience comes in and performs. There's no seats. There's no...
Oh, really do it to the max, right?
All the time.
Yeah.
In this play that we're doing now, Anne Waldman's wonderful Red Noir, the audience does sit, and after a while, we take their chairs away and see to it that they join us in the action.
Oh, they join you on the stage, which is everywhere.
There is no real stage.
No, right.
There's a runaround in which the actors move around the theater.
Yeah.
And we're in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And at the end, everyone enters into a kind of free flow in which everyone moves and sings and speaks.
Sounds like herding cats. No, I mean, it sounds like like anarcho. It sounds like a participatory theater, living theater, rather than on the stage there, and the audience is here. You want to involve everybody in it.
Everybody equally.
Yeah.
Equally
even, yeah. And it's been going for so long. Great. It's been called that. I wonder if we could maybe. We'll get to that. That's really good. And she's a great poet. She was friends with Allen Ginsberg.
Marvelous.
And she's been on the scene for a long time of justice and so forth. And a real poet. Many, many books she's published.
Yes.
And it's her
first play.
That's her first play.
And she was at all the rehearsals.
Yeah.
And working with us on changes, working with the actors wonderfully.
How do you take, what was it, did she write it as a playwright, or did she have a story? I don't know how that gets done between the people that are in theater and so forth.
She wrote a play with 6 characters.
Okay, right.
And it was published, and it was based on the noir film, on the crime films.
Yeah.
And I added to that an ensemble of 25 anarchists who represent the world, the best part of the world, who confront this criminal element.
Now, wait a minute. She had written a play, and had the play been performed?
No.
She wrote it for, and with you? Or you were in sync with one another in that, creating that? Or she created that of whole and then presented it to you, and then you made some adaptation? And how does that work?
Well, she published a play with 6 characters, and I did a play with 30 characters.
Okay, good. But she published the play like as a book or a script.
Yes, it was in a book.
But it wasn't performed.
No.
This is the first performance.
Her first performance.
And she had you as director then.
Yes.
Putting it together. So there was a bit of collaboration there.
Very strongly.
Very strong between you and she.
She worked with me. Yeah. We hassled over every word, over every nuance, over every idea.
Enunciation matters. The enunciation matters. Yeah, you did. Okay, well, you got a great talent in her. She's a real poet.
She's magnificent.
Yeah, right. And you still did, I think when you were down at the thing, you did the Brig at the Clinton Theater. You got this new theater. That's the point is, you're back in town. And I do want to talk some, if you don't mind. That's really interesting. We'll get to that and let people know about even they can get down to the theater and everything.
Sure.
And to see it, because how long does it run? We'll just get that done for a minute.
It's scheduled surely to run to the end of January, and we're talking now about the possibility of extending that.
Oh, good, okay.
Because we're having very good response and very good audiences.
Very, very, very.
And we've had some very good reviews.
Okay, that's all to the plus. That's really good. So it'll be through January. People could get how to get there, and they could. We'll give them a link to the site, to the site and everything like that. I wonder if maybe we could back up a little bit and reminiscing a little bit. You're getting started. We were talking about it. You're a New Yorker originally, but from background in Germany, or no?
No, I was born in Germany. And I came to New York when I was 2 years old. So I really was brought up in New York. But I was brought up in a very specific community, a German Jewish community. I was bilingual. I spoke German at home and English outside of my home.
Right.
And
your father was a rabbi?
My father was a rabbi.
What reform?
He's a conservative rabbi.
Okay.
Which tries to take the modernism of the reform and the tradition of the Orthodox and make them work together.
And that was important to you in terms of your upbringing? Was it important to you, that religious, or that, the Jewish?
The modern and the traditional is important to me.
Okay. But you were in that kind of a setting in New York City, and you were just saying that maybe Midtown and the East Side near Lexington, in the middle of everything on the East Side.
Right.
Okay, and you went to school there and all that sort of thing?
I went to school there, and because my father was working, trying to arouse Americans to what was happening to the German Jews.
Yes, how horrible.
I was trained to do a lot of recitations as a little child.
Yeah.
Even in Madison Square Garden, I recited German poems about the plight of the German Jews. So I was really trained to political theater from the very beginning.
Yeah, Madison Square Garden's a pretty big house. Yeah, that's a big house. You were doing that
big
as
house.
The big house.
Well, it was a different house then.
Yeah, I know. I understand, but it was a big theater, and they were involved on that issue. Were they involved on the issues that you become identified with? You're very much of a anarcho bent kind of idea of reading the human condition and all that. Were your parents involved in that kind of way with the understanding things, or the family
not in
setting?
anarchism, but they were certainly opposing the gruesome American quota system, which through Franklin Roosevelt did not allow the German Jews that could have been saved to come to America, and we opposed that very strongly and wanted an influx of the people we could save.
It was so horrible, wasn't it? Must have been terrible not to have that taken account of by the leadership of this country at that time.
Well, it made me lose faith in the leadership of this country. That's true. I still don't have any faith in the leadership of this country.
None.
Or of any country.
No, of any country at all.
No, I think there's a better way to organize things.
Yeah.
A beautiful anarchist form that's open to everyone, where decision-making is not made by an elite group, but is made by the populace. It's all a very different kind of world when you see it through the optimistic eyes of anarchism, and the more humanistic forms of organizing that we can do if we had the will and the heart.
Yeah, it's there. I don't know if we're talking Buchanan, or Barcelona. Barcelona
and is a perfect example.
Yeah,
yes.
There were things going on in Spain. That was something that was inspirational to you and to a lot of people. But you're talking, who is it? Who's the guy, the anarchist? Not Fuller, Buckminster Fuller is the one. The famous anarchist that come to me now. It doesn't come to me now. He's up in the East Coast, who talked about economics. It'll come to me. It escapes me now, but and that was something that you evolved into. Your family was, what were your brothers, sisters? Was it?
I have no brothers and sisters.
No brothers. Was the family setting warm, intelligent, intellectually stimulating, and that sort of thing, or?
We were very involved in the political situation of Germany.
Yeah.
And working very hard.
Right.
To save people, and I was always aware of the political level of art. My mother had been an aspiring actress who wanted to work with the great German director Erwin Piscator.
Okay.
And she fell in love with this idealistic young rabbi. And at that time it was unthinkable that you could be a rabbi's wife and an actress.
That rabbi was your dad?
The rabbi was my dad.
And he was idealistic?
Very idealistic.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get at. It was idealistic. Yeah, okay, right. Okay, yeah.
And so these two young people decided that they would come to New York and that my mother would give up her theatrical aspirations, and instead of her being an actress, they would have a daughter who would serve in my mother's, as a surrogate actress for my mother. And that's who I am.
Too bad they weren't able to get anybody a daughter who was able to become interested in the theater. I'm making a joke, dear. You've been the queen of the American theater in very, very many ways in terms of political relevancy, what you've been trying to do. I think it's fair to say. And so that's where it was. So that's, what is that, 39? Or what year are you talking?
I don't know.
No, when they came.
When I was 2 years old, must have been 28.
28. Oh, because it was in the wind. He hadn't been 33 yet, and he hadn't taken over. I see. Okay, yeah, right. Okay, and that's it. And then you had an education in the family. He was idealistic, intellectually curious, interesting, trying to make this thing. So you had a privileged upbringing intellectually and in terms of the family setting, right? And then you got interested in that. Whatever happened with your interest in, what was it, Piscant? What did you say?
When I graduated high school,
where'd you go? What school? Public school?
When I graduated high school.
Yeah, public school, I said.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Julia Richmond High School.
Okay.
There was just at the time that Piscator began the dramatic workshop at the New School for Social Research.
Right down, was it still down on 12th Street?
Yes. Right? And I became his student, and I am still trying to fulfill his vision.
And that had been your dream to be that, or your mother?
My mother's, and now mine.
Well, did she make his acquaintance of the man and everything? And
only in my schooling.
Only in your schooling, but she didn't. Okay, that's good. Well, isn't that interesting? There was a following on, and she'd been interested in before they even.
Right.
Maybe even before you were a gleam in your daddy's eye, as they say. Right. You know, right? Okay, that's good. And you were picking up on that, and then you did that, and then you went to, and then did you do? When did you meet Julian, if I could say?
I met Julian when I was 17 years old.
That would be soon after you met you were doing the work down at the New School.
In fact, before I joined Piscator's
And
school.
you were politically active then? You were political.
I was political, but I had no idea really what my politics were. But when Piscator did his auditions, he demanded of each of us who did an audition for him to tell him what our purpose in doing theater was, what our vision was, what our ideal was. Yeah. And I thought I had it easy. I said, oh, I'm a pacifist. And he said, well, so am I, but how are you going to be a pacifist in a war-like world,
right.
in a competitive world,
so
in a capitalist world.
Yeah.
Can you answer that?
Yeah.
And
so
I
he didn't
said,
let you
no.
get. Yeah, you didn't get. He didn't let you get away with saying I'm a pacifist and let it go with that. Yeah.
And and I said to him, while I do my theatrical studies, I'm going to study that as a parallel study of what I mean by the possibility of a non-violent form of social organization. And I studied.
Who did you study?
I studied tribal worlds.
Yeah.
I studied the medieval. I studied monarchism. I studied socialism. I studied communism. And I couldn't find anything, including democracy, that in any way served the egalitarian and nonviolent purposes and
that you aspired to for the world.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I read the wonderful works of the anarchist philosophers, and I read about the history of anarchist experiments that you mentioned, Barcelona, that beautiful city that was run by anarchist councils for several years.
It worked. Yeah.
It worked wherever it had been tried.
Right.
Because it's a more sensible and reasonable form of human organization. And it always worked. The reason that it was suppressed, say, in Makhno's Ukraine or in the Paris Commune is because at a certain point a bloodbath wiped out all the anarchists, as a bloodbath wiped out the anarchists of the Paris Commune, as the ongoing tightening up of the beautiful original communist ideal became more and more reduced to a tyrannical form under Lenin and then under Stalin. And again, all the anarchists were wiped out. And in Spain, where we had our greatest successes, we were wiped out by the Spanish Civil War and the coming fascism that followed. So, of course, these wonderful experiments, if you wipe everybody out with a bloodbath,
they tend to go away. Yeah,
it's not going to work.
It's like species.
The strange thing is that it's not taught in the schools.
Yeah, anarchism.
It's not shown.
Yeah.
People don't know about Barcelona. People don't know about the Ukraine. It is not taught. It's in the books. It's on the internet, but it's not taught actively in the colleges.
Wow, that's interesting. What do the political scientists think about it when they refer to it at all? Do they think that, well, that was a nice idea? Or I remember...
They think it was irrelevant.
Were you at the Woodstock Festival in 1970?
No, I wasn't.
I was
but
there.
I know about it.
Everybody was there. Maybe Mr. Rockefeller said it's a disaster area. 600,000 people were, all that and everything. And somehow they had to make it a disaster. And somehow the food appeared and everything happened. And it was an epiphany. It was grand. It was in the anarcho tradition of everything just sort of happened like a jam session or something like that. And that's something that's worth taking account of. But you were interested in that early, even as a teenager. You were interested in that take on things. And it grew out and it's informed your political thought ever since, right?
Right. And Anne Waldman she likes to call herself a anarcho-Buddhist.
Buddhist. She's gone to Buddhism.
She's a Buddhist.
Yeah.
I guess she was very much influenced by Allen Ginsberg.
That's a good person to be influenced by.
Beat person, absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful
And
guy.
the Beat movement.
Yeah.
And she was very strongly Buddhist, but also anarchist. And in her play, which I hope everyone will come to see.
Yeah, it's on now at the Clinton Theater.
It's at the Clinton Street, at the Living Theater on Clinton Street, 19 Clinton Street, or is it 20? 20 Clinton Street, where we're performing it every night, Wednesday through Saturday nights at 8 o'clock, and you're guaranteed to have a very good time.
Y'all come. Y'all come to Clinton Street. Yes.
Clinton Street? No,
put out a call.
To the Living Theater.
The Living Theater on Clinton Street. Yeah, the
right.
Living Theater there at 20 Clinton Street, and it's down Lower East Side. And it's grand. I've been down there on a number of occasions. Everything is really good. You got that place. I'm happy for that. Picking up on that, when did you meet Julian? And if I understand, Julian was when you met him. You were young, of course, and he was a painter.
Yes.
And I don't think, if I'm right, set me straight, beautiful. You knew him better than I. That's a joke.
Sure.
That's
I'm
a
sure
joke.
that.
That's a joke, Judith. But anyway, you helped get him thinking in not only artistic but political terms.
Well, I was
theater.
I was finishing.
Did you introduce him to theater? You were in theater.
He always loved theater.
He
and
did.
Had been doing plays
as an artist
in school, but he was a painter.
Yeah.
He was exhibiting at Peggy Guggenheim's gallery.
Oh yeah, right.
In the whole abstract expressionist movement.
Right.
He was a force in that movement. And when I graduated from Piscata, we talked together, and I said, "What can I do now? I don't want to go into the Broadway commercial theater, and there is no off-Broadway theater." There were companies like the Provincetown Playhouse that preceded our adventure, but there was no off-Broadway, so we decided to found a theater that would explore the possibilities of both intellectual adventures and theatrical forms that were new forms.
Did you have to bring him to that interest in the theater over a period of time? Because you met, and there were sparks and things. And but you got him interested in the theater thing, or
I think he was already interested.
You were co-founders of the Living Theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we were very young. We were 18, 19 years old.
Wow, great to be young, huh? Would you love to be young? Would you like to be young? I would love to be 19 and know what you know now.
I'd love to be 19 because I'd have more time ahead of me to do all the things I want to do.
Yeah, I know. Well, you sure have done a lot. But I'm interested in that because it's a living legend. I mean, the Living Theater, and it continues and everything. And so you got interested in that, and from that particular, and you took a jaundiced view of much of what was passing for political wisdom by our leadership, right, from the beginning.
Tragic view.
Yeah, tragic view. Yeah, you did a tragic view.
Tragic
view. Yeah.
Well, we had war after war.
Yeah.
And economic disasters.
Right.
And many people suffering, even as they're suffering now.
Right.
And many wars, much of which seems completely unnecessary and asinine, as you say. And we don't know how to stop it. And we did plays about our not being able to stop it and wanting to stop it, like Paradise Now, which begins with, I don't know how to stop the wars. And that was certainly a fundamental theme and remains a fundamental theme. But now we're more reassuring. At that time, we were more confrontational.
Right.
We took people by the collar and said,
"Wake up!
How to stop the war!"
Yes, right.
And now we're sort of saying, "Listen, we could stop this whole system without it falling on our heads. We could make the means as beautiful as the goal.
Maybe subsume it rather than overthrow it."
Well, I want to overthrow it.
Yeah. But you don't understand what I mean. You know what I'm saying is that you're doing that. That's it. We just did a program about that kind of thing. What was the first play you guys put together, you and Julian, or what was the first venue, or not the venue so much as the vehicle?
It was Gertrude Stein's Dr. Faustus Lights the Lights.
Gertrude Stein.
About enlightenment, about the search for the truth.
Yeah.
About taking bold steps.
I like that, yeah.
And it was very beautiful, physically very beautiful.
Where? Can you remember where it were?
Yes, it was at the Cherry Lane Theater, and it had a beautiful set by Julian of the whole stage being sets of boxes, sort of the way this background here is.
Well, that's
with people standing at various levels.
Yeah.
And the search of Dr. Faustus and Marguerite Ida and Helena Annabelle and their little dog. And the big theme of how do you go to hell?
Yeah.
And you know, if you want to go to hell, kill something. And that's the story.
That was the first one.
That was the first one.
When would that have been? When would that first... I was trying to get you to...
1945.
45, right after the...
45 or 46.
45, 40, right at the end of the war then, right? The Second World War. And do you remember your feelings about the Second World War? At that age?
I was again it.
You were again the Second World War. Now that was the one that everybody was for.
Yeah, I was.
The whole nation was totally in favor of that war, almost. You understand?
Not the whole nation.
No, but with the exception of a couple of anarchists in the west side
I had
of New York.
I had a lot of struggle with my father, who wanted to help the German Jews.
Sure.
And I remember when I became a pacifist.
Yeah.
I went to see a movie called Nurse Edith Cavell. Okay. It's sort of a grade B movie. I have a tape of it. It's a grade B movie.
Okay, yeah.
And it has this beautiful actress, Anna Nagel, a superb British lady with blonde hair and blue eyes. And she played Nurse Edith Cavell, who didn't look like that at all. And she committed the crime of, she ran a hospital in Brussels, and she went to the battlefield and took wounded soldiers, and she didn't care what uniform they were wearing. If they were wounded, she took care of them.
Yeah, right.
We could get that far in our health care today.
Yeah, could we ever? If we could, yeah.
If someone comes in with a baby with 2 broken legs, the first question isn't,
what's your insurance? Yeah, I know, it's disgusting. It's horrible. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
Right. So, so our first aim was to liberate those people, and my father was trying to enlighten people about the horrors that were going on in Germany. And the American people said, oh no, the German people, an intellectual, fine, well developed, they couldn't be doing concentration camps, not possible.
That's it. So, even during the war, with all the propaganda ginned up and so forth.
Just before the war. When the war came, it changed and everybody was for the war.
Well, that's what I was saying.
I remember seeing this movie with Edith Cavell, about Edith Cavell, at which Anna Nagel, at the end, was buried in Westminster Abbey after being shot by a German
Gestapo or
soldiers? By German soldiers.
Yeah.
And I remember I remember exactly what she said because it touched me very much. And it's actually something that she wrote in her cell the night of her execution.
Like Anne Frank.
She wrote, "Standing as I am before God and eternity, I realize that patriotism is not enough. I must have no hatred nor bitterness for anyone."
Oh, right.
And I thought, wow, I finally heard something absolutely true.
Yeah.
And I went home to my rabbinical father.
We're getting mixed up because we were talking about the theater, but what year would that have been? Would that have been when you're still at home?
Remember.
Okay.
I ran home to my rabbinical father, who was trying to arouse people about
the plight of the Jews.
And I said, Papa, I just learned the most important thing in the whole world.
What? Yeah.
You know what I found out? I found out we must not hate the Nazis. I was in trouble from that day to this.
Really?
I've been busted in 12 different countries and served from overnight to 60 days, only because I believe that. Because I believe we mustn't have any hatred for anybody, no matter how bad they are.
You think that's Buddhist? or not? Associated
I'm not
with
a Buddhist. I'm a Jew.
You're not a Buddhist. You're a Jew, but not a Buddhist. Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like a Buddhist ethic in a way.
Yes, the Buddhists have it right about not hurting anybody.
And you did that, and your father was upset with you for coming on with that attitude, right?
There's nobody that wasn't upset with me about that.
Well, when I asked you about that, you were talking about the first play you put on and everything. It was 45, 46, you said, and that's what I was referring to. But in the Second World War, everybody in the United States of America was behind that Second World War against the fascists in Germany.
Nobody in the Living Theater.
Nobody in the Living Theater was. And it was formed and it was there then.
Well, there was a pacifist movement all through that period.
To be a pacifist in that war isn't the same as being a pacifist in the Vietnam War. I mean, in terms of to go against, when you got a whole nation who's so cheered up and so ginned up to go and do something and go against the tide of that, that's where it gets really tough sometimes.
Yes, I don't say it wasn't.
And you were doing that with your thing, it seems to me, your commitment to that poem or that idea. Running against the grain again, right?
The grain is the grain.
Yeah.
The human heart that doesn't want to do harm to another human being is another thing.
When they're telling everybody's business to go over and kill people.
Yeah.
And right.
Yeah. And they continue to do that.
And they can gin up patriotism.
And we're sending 30,000 people into
Afghanistan.
I
know, I think it's terrible.
God only knows why.
I don't either. I don't,
And this terrible escalation of the idea that this is a necessary war. This is an important...
This is the one that'll get everything straight,
Right, the war to end all wars.
Yeah, right.
And it isn't like that.
No.
And the only hope is that we wake up in time to understand that we have an obligation to help each other. In this play that we're doing now of Anne Waldman, there's a beautiful scene where we show a movie of the violence in Afghanistan to the audience, and our actors have a chorus of "Reach out to the Middle East, reach out to the Middle East," because that's the answer to this terrible problem, is to reach out to each other, to begin to understand each other, to begin to understand where the violence came from and abolish the roots of the violence. And that is very often economic, political, and these economic motives have to be discredited. And that's a large part of the work we're trying to do.
Thank you very much. I've had many a talk with Hannon and a little bit when we did the program with Julian way back. And forgive me, I'm not as you were and everything. And it was the economist of transcending scarcity, Bucky Fuller used to talk about, and there was the economist within the article, I still can't remember his name, it'll come to me, but we've talked it many times, who did the same thing, that we may be actually, in terms of our capability, transcending the ironclad laws of scarcity, zero sum, if I win, you have to lose, all those kind of things. Characteristic of Jimmy Joyce, as you told me one time. James Joyce said, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken.
Yes.
Is there something blowing in the wind, Bobby Dylan said, about this time that we lived? Let me share something with you. I did a program, re-aired a program I had done with, who's the famous Asimov? Did you know Asimov?
Oh, sure.
Isaac Asimov?
Yes.
Beautiful man.
Great man.
Beautiful man. I just loved him. And he said, among other things, one thing he said in the program was the one he wrote, he would write a book, like I would write a letter home to mother. You know, I mean, he would write a book on every figure, astrophysics, everything. The only thing he could not get his mind around was economics. He couldn't get around, he could not understand economics. He wrote on everything else. Economics informs the political process. But, so he did that. And he said, what did he say? He said, we live 200,000 years we've been here. Mitochondria we know now with clarity, the evolutionary process of which we are a part. 10,000 generations. And he said, this is the most privileged generation. And I think he was going 1950 to 2050 or something this time, out of all the sweep of human history, because this is the defining generation or the defining century, where we're either going to, let's say, as is apparently the case, destroy the whole species with weapons systems that are so sophisticated now that the war making that has been used with such regularity is really and truly out of date.
Right.
Okay? It's always been like that, but it had. Or we're going to reach a situation where there's going to be something like liberation of coming upon the transcending of scarcity, which has been the condition in which all human institutions evolved. A time of qualitative transformation. Do you feel that way?
I think that he was very right, that we have a choice, but I do feel, I think we're a very smart species.
Yeah, pretty smart.
I think facing the fact that we're either facing annihilation, self-annihilation, or change, that we're going to change. And I think
annihilation or liberation, which would you prefer? A liberation from the outdated, unjust institutions which do not give most of the people a real chance to avert. So we got a choice, Judith. Annihilation of it all or liberation of it all. Which do you go for?
Well, I think the people are not going to I think people are going to choose life.
No, but you have to choose. This is a world of
a
dialectic. You must choose. What do you want? Annihilation or liberation? Which do you go for? Thank you. Thank you.
I think the whole world is with me in this.
Yes.
I just feel.
I don't know. Some of those people, I think there's a death wish, Ernst Becker or something like that. I don't know. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think that people are too smart to choose annihilation. And therefore, I think there's going to be a new wave of a generation, and I see them coming up now. I do workshops with young people a lot.
You have faith in the young?
Uh-huh.
You have faith in
the young? And the young people don't want the annihilation alternative. They want to make the change. And they want to examine what kind of change is necessary. You said it. Economic change.
I think it is, don't you?
I think we got to get rid of the money system. I think we've got to find a different way to organize society without the monetary structure.
That's what keeps everybody enslaved, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so.
The monetary structure keeps us all enslaved. And as the young people are beginning to realize this, we're going to replace the monetary system with other systems of distribution and production, because money really has nothing to do with distribution and production.
I know what you mean. And I saw Allen Ginsberg. He gave that, not Ginsberg, I'm sorry, Greenspan. He was the guy, and he wrote that book a couple years ago or so, and he said he was amazed because you go Van Hayek and all that stuff, and you think if you get a lot of money, you're going to be happy. And he said he was amazed that having the money that everybody's after, and that's the main thing that motivates the society, is the money quest and all that kind of thing.
Right.
He said it doesn't create happiness.
Right.
He said he was surprised.
Now, how do we show this? With art, with music, with poetry. That's going to be the teacher,
I think,
that's going to show us how to switch from a monetary mentality to a humanistic mentality.
I think we need something.
Coming.
I think we need something, a place, a stage where we can perform. We should call it the living theater. What do you think?
Good.
Do you like that?
I like that.
I just came up with that now, but I thought that was a good idea.
The living theater, which talks about the possibility of life over death, over annihilation, which rejects the inevitable annihilation of the species and says, no, there's still time to save it.
Well, think about it for a minute. Isaac Asimov was a great guy. And if you think back at Second World War, we were trying, Judith, I mean, as far as I can tell, with all kinds of things, to kill each other just as hard as we possibly could, right? Full tilt boogie. Willow Run in Detroit, turning out bombs. They're doing the same in Germany and so on. And we were impotent at the level of species.
Right.
That's what he's saying. This is a unique time. This, people, Cro-Magnon cavemen probably sat around and said, this is really a unique time. The mastodons are huge, and this is because they had a self-reflective consciousness, and they did that great art in the south of France and everything. But this really is a time of qualitative. You could live in the 6th century. It took decades and decades to invent a tack. Now, every day, there's a new revolution coming from all the fields, right? It's like a quickening in pregnancy. You understand, in an evolutionary context?
We realize that there is an answer.
Did you ever have a baby?
Huh?
Do you have a baby?
Yes, I have 2 babies, 3 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren.
So you know what it is to birth a baby.
Oh, yes.
Okay, and there is a time when the water breaks. And it's 9 months, and it's not 10 months, and it's not 8.
It's 9 months.
9 months, and it's a big process. And then they have that same thing in evolution.
Right.
And we're coming up the evolutionary trail,
Absolutely.
up the evolutionary path, and we're getting to the point where there's going to have to be, they call it punctuated equilibrium.
Yes.
Stephen Jay Gould, Eldridge, and that.
Right.
And there's quantitative change. There's gestating. Gestating. We've been gestating for 200,000 years.
Now we're ready. We're ready
to leave the womb. To
change the way that we
relate
feel
to the cosmos,
to each other.
right? And also collectively relate to the cosmos. Perhaps it's like you get. That's when you get punctured. That's when you get a new species. Right. That's when you get a new thing. There was Australopithecus, or did you see the thing Ardipithecus? They got the new fossil they found. Science magazine gave the whole magazine. It's along the hominoid line. Australopithecine Lucy was along Australopithecine. But that line Ardipithecus, and it has characteristics of the line that is to emerge at 200,000 years ago in the Homo sapien.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to get at is this is a time of birth to a new way.
Right.
A qualitative ending and a quantitative, what do you call it? Punctuated equilibrium. We're about to come into a new relationship to the cosmos.
Right.
And we got the weapons that the modeling shows us are now species lethal. I do believe that is the case.
Yes.
You too?
Yes,
Wasn't as early as 45 when we were alive.
Well,
it was
45
not,
we
were impotent. No, but yeah, right. Oh, you're right. That's what did it, I think. See?
No,
that's
it didn't. That isn't what did it, but
no,
that was certainly part of the movement.
But you were part of that thing. And
I
then
think
you
we were part of the movement
Yeah.
that is now coming to flower as we realize that what will make the change.
What will
make the change
Right.
is a different attitude about who we are to each other. It's not economic or organizational, but it's economic and organizational insofar as who we are to each other.
Yeah.
Reflects in our economic and our organizational behavior.
I think some good economic theory might help to be able to have something that's not been possible. It's very hard. Galileo only got let off the hook about 12 years ago by the Catholic Church for saying those orbital pathways of Jupiter prove that we are the center of the universe, and they had. So if you're talking about liberation, that's something that's never been. You're talking about something new. It's synergistically out there beyond the womb, beyond the the evolutionary pattern, like leaving the womb.
Right.
So that's something that makes this time a particularly interesting one. And the more you're ensconced in that system, the less you're able to see it. It's the artists that are the antenna of the race.
Exactly.
You have to be the goldfish can't see the water it swims in. You understand?
But
it has to be outside of.
We are the artists. We are the explorers. We are the adventurers. You as an intellectual adventurer. I as a theatrical adventurer. We are going to find a way to prevent annihilation and
realize liberation of the human species.
Yes.
And the ecology.
Yes.
And it's all coming in this and Fuller. We both like Fuller, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Who was the other non-scarce, post-scarcity anarcho? It's crazy up in
Murray Bookchin.
Murray Bookchin. That's who I was saying. Thank you. I knew you'd come to Murray Bookchin. God bless him. He was saying the same thing.
Yes.
Bucky Fuller, major thinker we had, is saying we're transcending scarcity at an ontologic level. We have that was never been, and it didn't happen until about 1970 that we crossed that line at the level of capability.
We were working with Bookchin. Bookchin was hanging out at the Living Theater and had his group, the Crazies, at the Living Theater in the 60s.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he was very much ahead of his time.
Well, we're talking against 200,000 years of human existence, darling.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying? So it's coming. And Fuller got it zeroed in about 70. Bobby Dylan would say something was blowing in the wind. Woodstock Festival was going. Richie Havens was singing Freedom. There was something blowing in the wind. You were in France in 68, 69?
No, yeah, I was in France in 68.
There was something blowing in the wind there, too. It was in the wind. There was something mazy, you know?
But Bobby Dylan first sang Blowing in the Wind at the end of our General Strike for Peace activity, which was 7 days of strong demonstration for peace.
First time you ever sang the song?
Yeah.
You're kidding.
For us.
Where was that? Where were you? Where were you?
We were at Art Lugoff's.
Thank you, Art Lugoff. Sorry he just passed. It was such a sad thing at the Village Gate, right?
Right.
And that was the first time he sang it, right?
That was the first time he sang Blowing
What
in the
year
Wind,
that was? Do you remember?
And we were amazed.
Can you remember what year that was?
No, I don't.
No, okay, but it would have been around
69 maybe?
69, 70.
No, it was before that. It was before that because the General Strike for Peace had 3 years of activity in 63, 64, and 65.
Okay.
So it must have been 65.
Those artists are always out there ahead of the curve, aren't they?
I'm sorry?
The artists are always out there ahead of the curve.
Well,
they're the antenna of the race, you know?
We're running ahead, waving the flag, and the society follows us.
Yeah.
And let us hope they follow us to an understanding that the first step of economic change is to abandon our terrible money system, because the money system is a disaster from beginning to end and completely unnecessary. What has money got to do with health care? It has to do with, you know, you have to take care of sick people, not whether they're insured or not,
no, you
or not whether they have the correct papers or not, but because they're sick and they need help.
Right, right. Pretty simple, isn't it? You know?
It's a very simple kind of humanism that we change our idea of who we are to each other. And money is a terrible barrier that separates us from each other.
Yeah, and the economics,
And we got to get rid of our whole terrible economic system and find a better way to work, to distribute.
Particularly
Distribution and production have to be based on different principles than they are today under the money system.
Yeah, I think they're heading. Lord Keynes said, even I did a lot of studying economics. He said you're going to be confronted. We had this thing. Did you follow it? Do you ever look at the world as like theater of the absurd?
Of course,
like King of Hearts.
The whole world.
I mean,
is
and if you couldn't laugh, I think I would crawl up and die if you couldn't laugh at it. But they're going, and that thing that happened in real time in the real world, where Mr. Paulson came on September 20, 2008. He had 3 pages. Did you follow that? He had a 3-page thing. He went to everybody in the Congress. He said, got down on his hands and knees. We must get this through the Congress by this week, and have it signed by the President of the United States, or the whole world economy is going to fall apart. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Crisis moment?
Yes.
When the whole thing was going to fall off the deep end and everything like that? Theater of the absurd. And so we're going through that, and now they've done it, and they still do not have, that was a signal. And they still do not have a system or an economic underpinning. The whole people, fortunately, it would seem, Mr. Obama. And then you got Geithner, and they had Summers, and you got, Paulson and all. They still don't have a system, markets coming back. But Mr. Keynes said to grandchildren, letter he wrote to his grandchildren in 1930 in their maturity about now, you're going to be confronted by technologically induced unemployment. People are going to be unemployed massively because the technology is going to outdate the principle by which you can distribute income to people by their having a job within the economic machine. And they're now talking about we're going to have a recovery, the stock market's coming, it's going to be jobless. And the only way they have to distribute income to the people within a slave-like kind of way or a serf-like way is through having these income distribution through labor or through jobs.
Yes.
And it's going to be a jobless recovery. We're on the head of a dilemma, and they have not come up with an alternative understanding within that bubble of understanding within the system that the future requires.
Right.
So it's up to the artists and the intellectuals, don't you think, to provide some sort of an alternative? Absolutely. And where is that coming from? Murray Bookchin was good. I think Fuller was good.
It's coming from you and me.
Well, okay.
And but it's coming from the Living Theater and 100 and 1,000 other sources of of exploration.
Yeah, and also democracy in a sense like 100 trillion cells in the human organism. Do you realize that?
What?
In the human organism, human organ, there's something like 100 trillion cells, and they all work as a system, and they all interconnect, and everyone matters.
Yes.
So in the humanity thing, 60% of the world's trying to live with women who have to figure out which child they're going to let starve to death because they don't have food to give the kid. When you got the ability to provide, but you don't have a system that can distribute the demand for people to be able to have what they need to be able to live, so they can be concerned with the things that really matter, like art, and some of the things that really, really matter. And we need a new system, and it's not there.
But some of us have some good hints. Julian Beck wrote a beautiful poem.
Okay, yeah, back to Julian,
called, Revolution and Counter-Revolution, which Brad and I do as a little dramatic piece.
Oh, you do, Brad?
I'd love to do it on your program.
Now?
I think I don't have the text with us. We don't have the text.
Oh, you don't have the text, okay.
But we would like to come back and do that, and then talk about those principles which Julian was 30 years ago foreseeing as the necessary steps toward what you're talking about.
Would you send me a link? Or Brad, have Brad send. Are you good with the computer or not?
He is. I'm not.
Yeah, it's the youth.
But yes, he does.
I went with some friends, really cool. They're going to play. They had a 7-year-old kid, and the kid he had a pretty father, and they had a pretty sophisticated, does animation and whatnot. And the kid was playing the piano, 7 years old. His feet couldn't touch the floor. And he's sitting there, and he's playing the computer like Vladimir Horowitz plays the piano. I mean, it was very encouraging, you know, and all the youth do, and it's something that's going on, really something. There's hope in that and everything. But at the level of Murray Bookchin, we could do well to read again. Fuller, I think, and some of the others who bring these kind of things. And we need a system.
We've had a lot of philosophers urging us on to overthrow the old forms and adopt the new forms that are available to us.
Could I suggest maybe what we're going to have to do? You go back to your thing where you ran into trouble with your dad?
Yes.
Remember you said, we've got to love the Nazis or something?
Got to love everybody.
Love everybody, including the Nazis.
Yes.
Who were doing. That was a problem between you and your dad, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
now the question is, we get to this point, we got to have something that's we got to provide something. Intellectuals, let's say. You're outside this fishbowl. You got to view. That's where the new will come from, or at the interface between systems, right? And we got to provide an alternative that's so comprehensively appropriate to be liberating of the people and the ecology, and we have a capability of doing that. But it would also be the trickiest part. It would be able to subsume, rather than overthrow, subsume the old order in the way that your pacifist roots were telling you. We have to include everybody.
Yes.
That's different than overthrowing in a political sense or finding the bad guy, rather than we're all caught up in a situation that requires a qualitative change, and we're coming down to the end of that birth canal, and we need something there, so it'll include everybody on their own terms.
Right.
If you're an anarcho, you want everybody to behave on their own terms if you possibly can, right?
Right.
Even the supposed bad guys?
There are no bad guys.
There are no bad guys. Okay.
No. There are people that do bad things.
There are people who do bad things. It's different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
That is different,
It is different. And if somebody is doing bad things, it's up to us to help them not do bad things.
Help them see the way so that they won't do bad.
So they don't have to feel that they have to do bad things.
As strange as it seems, you and I sitting here talking, you know, the people that are in the van, even that might apply to our very handsome prince of a president, Obama, spoke so eloquently and so forth. I think they need vision.
Yes. Absolutely.
It sounds silly. They say they're running the show. You look at everything's reported by the stars of the plutocracy and all these people, but I think they need from the artistic community where the new ideas come, they need vision.
Yes.
And it's going to, do you understand? It sounds absurd because they
it doesn't.
They are supposedly our leaders. They know. We're trained to think that the leaders know, and we should just follow the leaders, and our institutions all go along
Obama
with
never
it.
came to the Living Theater, to my knowledge.
Pardon?
I said Obama never came to the Living Theater, to my knowledge.
Maybe he would have done better if he had.
I think he would have.
I think we could have educated him possibly.
Yeah, I think we can still
or we're still living in a world of living theater. We're still living in a world, and that there is that's the characteristic of the time in which we find ourselves in everything now like that. I really believe that. What a time to be alive.
Isn't it wonderful?
It is in terms, and the Chinese argue that it's terrible. That's a terrible curse, you understand, in the Chinese, to live in interesting times because it's all very conflicted and things like that.
Yes.
But we're doomed for that because these are the most interesting times ever in the evolution of our species, right?
Absolutely.
And we're privileged to be alive and participate in that, linked to history and with a vision toward the future. So I can't think of anything more important than trying to fulfill that, don't you think?
I think you're right. So come to the Living Theater.
Absolutely. Everybody come to the Living Theater.
21 Clinton Street.
They got this kid down there, Brad or something like that. Brad, somebody or
Brad Burgess, my associate, is working with me to create this theater with a team of 20 wonderful people, all of whom have a vision and all of whom are working for the vision. And it's wonderful to see a stage with 30 people on it.
Where there were only 4 under the original script. It's been enhanced, Miss Waldman, right?
Yes.
We've enhanced it. And from her, she's a great poet.
She's a wonderful poet.
And it's from places like this that you might find something really, in a certain sense, outside the envelope, relevant to the future. And we need that. And there should be a place where those kind of ideas can be done. And so then it might be possible to be optimistic. But it would be, I like your thing, the thing. Everybody's included.
Yes,
everybody's included, and there's no enemy other than ignorance of how we get things right so that we all collectively, as a whole evolutionary process, can get out of here and get in touch with the universe at the new level that it's now time for us to come in association with.
Absolutely, you're right.
That might be part of what human purpose is about.
That's what we want to do together.
So why don't we do that?
We're doing it.
So we've made a decision here. It's a very hard decision. We've made a very hard decision, Judith. We've decided rather than annihilation, we're for liberation.
Yes.
And that's the choice that may be really uniquely now in this time up to humanity. So we ought to get busy and provide some of those alternatives to the people at all levels of society that need a vision.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's our next act.
Well, that's the next act, right?
So thank you.
No, it's my
pleasure. We're gonna expand on that.
Yeah.
And we'll do a few more plays.
Yes,
that are going to show people that the answer lies in changing our attitude of who we are to each other.
Right. Right.
And not in militaristic